start recording.
Okay.
So you have an idea.
Yeah, let me just position myself. I'm at the edge of a train. I'm at the end of a train platform here, and I'm doing one of these rather unusual things, which is not to get on the trains as they come. So I just let everyone else get on them and get off them, and I just not get on them yet. And I'm in this La Floresta. Yeah, I was just so I was having lunch with my housemates, I guess, and the chat turned to, the chat turned to revolution, which is a kind of normal event, these days, perhaps maybe more so now than ever before. And my colleagues, my housemates, are from Argentina. One of whom is in her 70s and remembers the dictatorship in Argentina and was there, and she left because of that. And so many people in the Mediterranean are aware of these things. Because Italy, Spain, Greece all went through dictatorships in the last century. And in the background was the television talking about the Spanish bank BBVA, which last year earned a record-breaking profits of 38% increase in profits and the largest ever shareholding, dividends, whatever, which, creates so people just screaming and shouting and, and inside me I was, how do we have these conversations, and how do we do that consciously? How do we have conscious communication about these very deep subjects, which I think are, you and I are aware of these things for a long time, but it's going to become everybody's everyday life, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years. So and a lot of people will just think, hang on, what happened? This is, so how can we create content that actually shows, given you founded the School of Conscious Communication and I was part of the founding of the School of Consciousness, we ought to be able to demonstrate this is what conscious communication looks like. So if we're having, here's a video of two kind of aging white men. You go, oh, do they have anything worthwhile to say? Oh my God, maybe they're gay. If they're gay, it's okay. Maybe they're gay, it's okay. No, I'm straight. I'm a straight white aged man. I'm probably in a very small minority now. But do we have anything useful to contribute to the next decade or two where, having witnessed from, let's say, the fringes, this transformational period we're through? So that's, and if so, what might that content look like?
So that's it? That's the idea?
Well, that's the beginning of an idea. And I was thinking about who do I want to have conversations with and record them. So that, because what I'm finding is that it's much easier to say, for example, Tim Minchin, the wonderful Australian-based musician and comedian. So Tim Minchin did this amazing tirade. I'll find it about confirmation bias. Bless you. A beautiful 11-minute tirade on confirmation bias and just how unaware most of us are about the way we think and the way we, Woo!
Trying to be as conscious as possible, but I keep sneezing.
Spaced out, does that say relaxation? Under the influence of what? What are you under the influence of?
Of you.
Of me. Well, I'm only here because you're here. I can't be here if you're not here.
I'm trying to find the right. Keep going. I'm with you.
So part of I think it's easier these days to point people towards something. So just watch this. It's 5 minutes. It's 10 minutes. Rather than the challenge of having a conscious communication with anybody in the same rush. We're saying to sort of warm up and then understand each other. So how do we? It's a way you point them to. Just watch that to give you an intro into what we're talking about, and then maybe we can have a conversation. So I find that in my everyday experience, there's to be a willingness to go into another room and say, okay, now we're going to enter a space where, are we aware of our confirmation biases? Are we aware of the state you've just been in, and you're carrying it into this next conversation? I do it as well. I'm bitter. I'm upset. I'm now in a conversation where I'm bitter, upset. So this level of, yeah. So I'm sure you maybe have a lot of content on this, where either you're recording it as you, but I'm just wondering if we can do that with 2s and 3s, so that we can show this is what a conscious conversation might look like. The final thing I'll say now is Chris Thompson, my mentor who died a few years ago, he'd often do thought experiments, and he'd say, what would happen if 10 very conscious people got together? And eventually I said, no idea. He said, that's the right answer. I don't think it's happened. It just doesn't happen. Somehow you don't seem to get a lot of very conscious people, unless maybe indigenous, maybe some groups, but it's very rare.
Well, I get this picture of a bunch of mice in a mice trap getting together in one of the rooms and deciding, okay, let's try to figure this out. We seem to be doing the same thing over and over again, and these mice are the more conscious ones. I think you're bringing something up that's huge in terms of, like, how do we measure, or how do we assess what's conscious and who's conscious and in which context. Like, here I'm fiddling with these little backgrounds, but I noticed I was in a conversation yesterday, and it was a very interesting one about designing a game. And I was listening, and I was trying to, a little bit trying to give backgrounds, like trying to watch the shift in the condo and see if I could actually sort of be the person who is trying to say which convo type we're in a sense, right? A new type of not quite a moderator, more an observer, right? A listener. And I found that I was way behind. I could hear the switch, but I couldn't find my convo types, and I wasn't being that good at it, and I would sort of leave it up past the point, but I was trying, right? And like, it's like this, is this an investigation or is this an exploration? There's another combo type that's an exploration. Like, part of what I've assumed is if you can actually state the convo type you're in, you're being more conscious of it. So if you're telling a story and you're telling a story, it's very different than if we're in a two-way conversation and we're trying to figure something out, right? I mean, that's kind of obvious. But what I find is most people have absolutely no interest in convo types. It's like a musician, and you're giving them the structure of the music, and they want to play the music, they want to listen to the music. They don't give a shit about the structure behind the music or talking about it. And I think with conversation, it's even more so, because people love to chat. They get really into it. They get immersed, and you sort of lose yourself, right? In certain conversations, you lose your awareness of self. I guess what Gurdjieff would call self-remembering, right? And that's what seemed to be pointing towards being more conscious, is how aware are you in that moment as an observer, as you're speaking. So getting back to maybe your question of if we had 10 conscious people, I think the more people you bring into a conversation, the less conscious it gets. I think that people tend to drift in their listening unless they're really, want to participate. So I think in a one-on-one, we can maybe do it. And as you add people, it's going to get harder and harder. But I think I've maybe lost the drift of the convo as I'm speaking. And so I'll go back to you. I need to blow my nose. That's my problem. Just excuse me.
Okay. It's a never-ending stream of trains.
Ah, sorry about that, Chief. So,
Yeah, I was, by its nature, a lot of thinking, people end up going into, they go from branch to branch because it's like a tree, people go, and then you say something and suddenly they're just basically doing either active imagination or I forget the name of Freud, what he called it, association, just constant association from concept to concept without having okay, what's the purpose of this? So apart from, we're having a conversation, it's enjoyable. It's nice to be listened to, which is okay. But then the subtleties of, as you say, being aware, something's happened, there's a shift towards, like there's a new, like if you're talking about the music metaphor, there's a symphony and we're in a different movement now. It's shifted from that. We're now in a next phase. And then knowing when that has ended and then having a pause to say, okay, where are we now? And then moving into the next bit. So it's really ultimately the end of all this. There are tools that people can easily access so they can at least have more fulfilling and productive conversations that if the output is I'm much more conscious of my style now or what I generally talk about, or I filled in some gaps in my awareness, then it's great. But behind me we've got those people who have done a lot of work on themselves. I believe they can just hear the frequency of someone's voice and very quickly tell that there's a lot of space inside that brain behind me. Bless them. No, that. And then they're drunk. Anyway, perfect example. I'll move across.
well, aren't you on a bit of a quest for finding conscious thought? Or, I mean, you're forever traveling and meeting people and having conversations in a large number. And you probably go from meeting geniuses to meeting people that are not quite present, full spectrum, and you probably assess pretty quickly where somebody's at and what kind of conversation you can have with them.
Yeah, you know very quickly, don't you, how far one can go, and even whether it's worth the trouble or the energy of that. But I just sense in the next phase, I feel, I mean, I've been talking to a lot of people recently, and I get a sense there seems to be a common thread that something's happened energetically and at some level, and there's a shift happening right now. And yeah, we're at this year, a lot of stuff's gonna that most we don't know what's happening or what's coming, but it's coming. So a lot more conversations are going to be happening, a lot more arguments from bias, and it's how people like us, even though we've got biases as well, we're maybe a bit more aware of them and can hold and go, hang on, can we stop? And until such point as conscious communication, non-violent communication, all other forms is more recognized, and then that's required. Like if we're going to have a conversation in our community here, we need to have these tools, and at least have a humility that this is not going to be easy because nobody alive has ever been through this.
Well, if I can say so, like yesterday I was at a lunch and I'm staying at this place called the Visionary Hub, and two ladies, Sylvia and Lori, they bought 20 card sets, and I'm training them and figuring out how to put everything together. And they have a lunch once a month, and they they use the cards. There's another card set called points of view, which is actually pictures with a word. And then they brought up the value cards. And so we sat down, there's 8 of us, we have lunch. And then everyone sort of asks a question or sort of has an issue. And then you draw 2 cards, one of the points of view, one of the values card, and then you speak about it. And it really draws out someone's deeper issues. And what happens is everyone at the table is listening. Everyone is consciously listening differently than I think normally, because it's an exercise, right? And so you can't interrupt, you can't talk to the side, you have to focus your attention to give everyone their turn. And everybody, you could tell everyone loves to be the center of attention, or everyone loves to have the groups listening in this way, and they speak about whatever's that is important to them, and then they get feedback or intuition or questions back. And it's only a very slight touch of what I've experienced when you get people sitting around a table. Like I have a harmonizer table, right? That's actually a game board specifically for that purpose, which is different from a lunch table. So what I've seen is, as you get more into a facilitated structure using tools, you bring something out of people that's very different from normal conversation. People are much more aware. And the funny thing is they're drawing a divination. They're not choosing it. It's random. It's a mystery. And that adds to I think the interest and the awareness in what's going on, because you got to figure out what it is. And everyone, I think, had a very good experience. And everyone got cards that were quite amazing to sort of answer their question. Like, one woman who's going into sort of feng shuiing houses in order, she gets initiative and order. It's so dead on in sometimes, right? And again, it's random. So I don't know how that can be brought into, as you say, that we need to be more consciously communicating. But I've seen with the tools that I have that people have to use their mind. They have to break a pattern. They have to, like, we get so locked into our perspective, or what you say, the bias, the way we see things. And it's for some, it's never going to change. It's like pattern locked. And so how do you break the pattern? How do you shift someone's perspective enough so they see something new? And that's, I've seen it over and over again. But again, it doesn't seem, it's like, again, the musician wants to play. People want to talk. They want to stay in their patterns. They don't want, for the majority of people, unless they're, let's say they want to improve their marriage, or they want to impress, maybe impress a woman or a man. When someone gets to the point where they're not getting what they want their normal way, then I think they're open to change. But most people, I don't know, they don't even seem to think about their thoughts. They don't even seem to think about their thinking. When you ask people about how did they think, or why did they think a certain way, it might be a question they never even asked themselves. So I wonder sometimes about the levels of self-reflection that people are at. You have to be self-reflective to get to the point of watching your own patterns. And I think within Ken Wilber's scale of, his integral theory, and he's got different levels, that it's only in I think the top 2 levels that people are even interested in how they think. They don't even question it. So like maybe 75-80% of people on the planet never question how they think. Mm-hmm. And so when you're talking to someone like that, you can't really bring that up. You can't, there's such a diversity of levels of consciousness and degrees of awareness, that when you get them all in the same room together, like it, have you heard of Jordan Peterson?
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's having quite an impact, I think, and he talks quite intelligently to me. I mean, he can really string together the words quite well, and he makes a good point, and you have to follow him along. That's a good sign to me. And I think that I think you could be in that same place. I think we both could, in a sense, given the right circumstances and the right audience. But I think we're like fringers, so we're sometimes persona non grata.
Just muting the. Eventually, I will get on one of these trains. I'm going into town to meet a friend. Yeah, I mean, sure, I know many. Again, I know many people. I know of, whether I haven't counted them, but there's enough people that I've spoken to who, for them, Jordan Peterson says things that like, oh God, this, that are really dangerous, to do with masculinity and to do with attitude and to do with, you got to fight for it, you got to, it's doggy. There's just, I was thinking about it today, there's such a fracture within humanity's belief systems. There's so many of them. And not even counting religion, but whether you go into New Age or atheism or whatever it is, it's just thousands of them. And then people who don't have any conscious construct that they think about because it's been delivered to them. And if they've watched 200 different YouTube videos, they'll have 200 different belief systems functioning at one time. Depending on context, they'll go, and they'll behave differently somewhere else. So I think that sense of constant fracturing of belief system, it isn't one belief system uniting us. So it's not conscious. So I mean, a lot of the time right now, I'm thinking about what is it about the evolution of this planet that is leading to this, and where's this going now? And having spoken to some Indigenous elders recently, they seem calmer. Like, it's just part of the cycle, man. It's just what will come, and a lot's going out the window. A lot of folk are going to die, and they don't know how to survive. They do, but all this stuff. So I'm, these are my. There's just today and past few days is a sense of wanting to create as much content as possible that can at least be pointed to and say, not saying by any means that I have the answer. Just I'm willing to, as you say there, explore and be brave to say, what, we're going to need some tools to deal with what's coming.
How's the storytelling program going?
It doesn't begin till today is the 2nd of Feb, so I'm not starting until 3 weeks on Sunday. This is my last week in Spain. I head back next Friday, and so this is the last week being here, tidying up, sorting things out, and feeling that my sense is if I'm being a prophet in that kind of archetype, it's like really the more people are able to get back to nature and learn the skills of just getting on with other people and knowing what your skills are, what you're lacking and what others have, and how you can collaborate, and that force will become stronger and stronger, I think, over the years to come. Mental health and having the tools to deal with these things. This is why I'm creating content that you can point to. Yeah. So I don't know if you know Michael Dowd, but if you're watching this, I'll send you the link. I can't remember if I sent you before, but so there's a Michael Dowd thing and the confirmation bias thing. These are beautifully done. And then the Michael Dowd piece, who's just been invited to the Club of Rome, I think, or some major institution that's looking at his work regarding post-doom, prophecies, and how do we deal with what's coming. He provides so many wonderful resources and he's got the time and energy to do it, which saves me having to do it, or you having to do it. It's great. So it's this sort of efficiency of, read that, and then if you read that and you've had a look at that and you understand what we mean by this, and why that isn't going to help, then at least you've got some more of awareness to have a shared, have a dialogue about these subjects. And I brought his name up because he has this lovely conversation with an academic talking about we need spaces, we need stories, and we need skills. So the more spaces we have where we can tell our story, share our story, be heard, see the story that's cracking, create the new ones, and then develop the skills either together or share them. I would add tools to that. I didn't mention tools, but we need tools. And whether they're created by someone like yourself or whether they're co-designed or whatever it is, but we do need these spaces. So it looks like you've got that now. And it's great to be able to have these spaces where those, spaces, stories, skills, tools.
Well, the spaces, I think we've all been, at least both of us have been really moving between spaces quite a bit. I think you quicker, me longer. And I mean, I've had this idea of the dream space, right? Which is sort of like that, I guess, like that place in Brussels or the place that you had talked to me a while back. And it, I think it's just lacking in cities or communities for a place for, true creativity to take place. Like at least in Canada, there's a community center, there's coffee shops, there are places, let's say a playhouse theater, but to have a place where you could just sort of drop in, not pay money, and create with other people and meet other people to create things. Like there are sort of studios, like places where there's a whole bunch of studios together, but each person has their own studio. So, I think, the idea of the dream space to me is a huge one in terms of, for a community, I think to really blossom, it's going to be based upon their artists. It's going to be based upon the people that are bringing culture to that community. And we're in such a transactional, money-based system that, has sort of, it just kills so much free expression because you can't make a living doing it. And like the wandering minstrel, right? I mean, what did the wandering minstrel or the storyteller do in the old days? They probably would walk around between the cities, show up, tell their stories, probably get fed, get a place to they'd be the star in a sense, right? And that, everything has changed because everything's gotten so big. I just wonder that if civilization really does collapse, which it could, solar flash could end everything like this. I mean, that seems to be one of the big sort of apocalyptic ending stories is, solar flash, where all the electrical stuff ends and then we're all left alone. 3 days of food in the city, everyone's going to starve to death and zombies will start coming out of the woodwork. I mean, there's so many stories in the movies about what could happen, and it's
always do those zombies, I tell you.
It's all bad. Like, remember, like I couldn't imagine, before how many years ago, all of a sudden all the zombie stories, and now it's coming true, right? I mean, they're predictive programming or they're futurizing. Good God, I mean, we're really in a mess right now. Anyway, with that, fine. Is your train coming? Is this?
Well, I've now missed, inverted commas, maybe 7. They go every 2-3 minutes now, and they're very proud of this fact. The Barcelona transport system, we've got trains every 3 minutes now. Absolutely, totally unnecessary. There's no need to have a train every 3 minutes. None. And so always have just been used, and they've reduced their prices. So the money's coming from somewhere else. And even today in Spain, there was a queue of people in Madrid queuing up because they're giving treasury bonds at 3% interest now. So it's a queue of people, Bread and circuses, friends, bread and circuses. So, I don't really know that there are, as my friend says in Greece, he says there are very intelligent people who prophesize this. There's some very intelligent people over there prophesizing that. There's some very intelligent people over there prophesizing something else. I don't know. And at some point, someone's got to be right. And say, "I see, told you so." It's, yeah, but you didn't get that right, or that right, or that right, or that right. And that's always true. That's narrative fallacy. It was, what's his name? Taleb talked about this uh, in one of his books or whatever. So we're constantly trying to create stories from the past and say, "Oh, well, we knew that was." No, we don't. So really, the greatest tools are those of adaptation to whatever's arising. You see, that was just literally proof of point, and there's nobody here to get it. Where am I going with this? Yeah, where do you stand? Are you hoping for a technological miracle, aliens from outer space arriving, environmental disaster leading to suddenly, oh, we better do something, or dystopic, Netflix scenarios? what, what?
Well, I recently, did I send it to you? I made a timeline, a 9 timeline map. Did I send
Oh,
that?
right, no, I didn't know.
Okay,
No.
I'll send it. And it's
Dying timeline map.
it has good, neutral, evil. It's based upon the moral alignment that's in Dungeons and Dragons. So it has
Okay.
chaotic, neutral, and lawful, and then good, neutral, and evil. So it creates 9 different possible outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So for each of those, I made a timeline, gave it a name, and then I sort of see the world as these timelines are competing. There's different groups of people in each timeline, and each is trying to make this future come real. And so the evil ones don't want anyone to know there is a timeline or an evil timeline. So they of course want to hide everything and not acknowledge that this may exist. And I'm figuring if there's one map that gets me killed, it's going to be this one, because they the evil ones do not want this one, especially one of them. They do not want to be identified, and they definitely don't like people doing it. But it just seems so, it's so obvious that somebody or some groups are really trying to, to bring in the dystopian future of 5G surveillance state, digital bank currencies, digital IDs. If you protest, they cut off your bank account kind of stuff, which has already happened in Canada, to some degree. They shut down the bank accounts of the truckers. Anyone supporting sending money to the truckers, they shut down their bank account. Like, that's about as worse as it can get, right? I mean, we're supposedly having free speech, but Canada has gone so bad so quickly. And you watch, you listen to Justin Trudeau, and it's like listening to someone lie all the time. And they supported by the CBC, which is lying all the time too, and everybody's lying. And the average Canadian is just kind of, they go along with things, but even now it's so obvious that even Canadians are kind of, I think something's a little bit off, because when the truckers came across Canada, there was like every overpass would have 100, 200 people with flags. Like, there was a lot of support that wasn't being seen or covered ever in, of course, the corporate media. But these, thousands of trucks, went across all of Canada, went downtown. This is unheard of for Canadians to do this, unheard of. And they did it because the mandates are so bad and so stupid. And, now it's like these blue lights. Have you seen these blue lights going in? Like, there's these black lights going in across the world. This guy in Miami started showing. He's always ahead of the game on, again, through TikTok. So you got all these sort of weird, all these kind of strange things are just happening. And again, you see it all in TikTok, but the normal news doesn't cover any of it. So the sleepers have no idea of what's going on. The TikTokers are like, what the fuck is that? Share, share, share. And I of course take it off TikTok, post to my Instagram, which nobody sees. I mean, I'm like a reporter that is, I have an audience of about 5, but I'm very
maybe that's a good thing.
well, yeah. But it's like we're all in our own particular brand of madness. And so when these people come together to consciously communicate, I mean, I think our species is definitely going to have some sort of big breakthrough, because we're in this cauldron and there's just too much madness. Like there's just too much lying. And before they could get away with it, but because of the internet, they can't. And so there's just everyone, I think, is in some sort of psychosis, like that isn't really being talked about. That because there's no just like you said, there's no real shared reality. Everyone is coming from such a different place.
And it's a micro reality. So, you know, when I got on the train earlier, I tend to do this because so I've got my earphones in. I could talk very loudly, so I'm talking like this. I just stand on the train. Yeah. I know what you mean. And it's because I'm in English. People just looking at, you know, and then they look at me. No one's gonna stop me. They'll just whatever, and I'm just standing there, and I look around, and everybody's on their phone. So everyone's on their phone, and everybody's looking at some micro piece. They're scrolling, whatever, but they're jumping very quickly from thing to thing. One was reading a book, but she was listening to music. She was cut off from everything. So, you know, it just reminds me of, you know, good old Atlas. You know, Atlas Talisman, who, bless him, you know, when he was in America years ago, he would go on a train and say, "Hi everyone, I'm an artist from New Zealand. If you want to come and sit next to me here, I'm here. Come and have a chat rather than watching adverts or doing your thing. I'm here." And he would do that. He would kind of break the fourth wall. Now, of course, he's got the courage to do that. You know, maybe he's got the fighting skills as well. But it's like, you know, if he did that in Scotland or Glasgow, you'd be, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what would happen. But it's like it's the sense of there's a sort of background shared awareness that you only do certain things in certain places, and so we don't talk about it. But really, if someone just stood up and looked around in a train and said, "Why are we all looking at our phones? We could be chatting to each other." Let me just go and prove this. I'll just get on and then get off again. And then there'll be confusion because I just went on, show the thing. They think I'm in the police or something. Well, that guy just got on, looked around, and he got off again. Always do weird behavior in public in twos. Don't do it alone. Yeah, I'm not sure what conscious conversation we're having now. I should get the next train. We're still exploring. We're exploring braveness.
We're bravely exploring.
So here's the thing. I remember. Do you have any dice on you, right in front of you?
No, I don't.
Do you have a dice? Okay, pick a number between 1 and 6.
4.
Okay, I'll get the fourth train after this.
Okay. 12 pence.
Okay. So I have to be conscious of. Must have been years ago when we talked about something, and you know, sharing. People ought to share really unusual experiences more, so that we know people have them, and maybe more people have them than we know. And there's a woman she's called the psychic paramedic, and if you look up psychic paramedic, she was on that New Thinking Aloud or whatever it was. So she talks about being a paramedic and going in, and then suddenly at some point she started to feel energies and things coming in and telling her what to do, and she could see what was happening energetically, and didn't talk about it until eventually she had the courage to talk about it to her colleagues. And then she's done all the study and finds out that maybe 15% of the human population is exactly the same, and we just don't talk about it. Or they have there we are, or we have different experiences. So I've had a divination which is a specific form of divination by someone who was trained in it and who's been properly initiated in a process. And in that process, because it was going very deep into my specific birth process and pre-birth process. And one of the things I've always liked about Chris, my mentor's work, was he said, if choice is a property of life, because we see choice everywhere, it's a word in English, but it points to a phenomenon where things, that or that is constantly happening, then it must be happening before birth as well. So choice must be part of the process. One chooses, that's a logical assumption. There's no reason why choice only begins as soon as you're born, or it starts here, and it's happening all the time. And that phenomenon of selection, shall we say. So, and in this divination, there was this thing around, there are earth spirits or beings that receive the soul or the being coming from star beings. So that there are, we're all from the stars ultimately, we're made of that material. And people keep forgetting that, we're bound to it. No, we're on a kind of very old rock going at very high speed through a universe that's billions of years old. So it's all been happening for quite a while. So there's a lot going on and we don't even know, not even aware of, but a sense of what's coming into the human form, and there's some kind of agreement that my psyche presents in the form of a dream. So when we dream, there's human beings in it, there's material stuff, but it may not be that. So there's a sense of knowledge coming in from the stars into the human form. And if something's not happening in the contract between the earth being and there's a contract there. There's an agreement between what's coming in and how it's then given form. And what was coming through from all these things is that the ancestral lines of earth and what's been happening, there's an agreement for new information to come in. And that for me is what excites me, that kind of conversation, because it feels more alive to me and more real than talking about the price of chips or people sitting what they're talking about there. So that is my sort of normal. That's so I think a lot of people have these kind of experiences, and dreaming is one of them. You have a dream, you're representing, and it's always weird. So, and life is weird and insane. So part of me just thinks there's a completely different information pattern coming in. That's incoherent now, but at some point we'll go, oh, right, okay, it makes sense now.
Well, I think that's linked in.
There.
What are we on train 2? I think that's linked into the breakthrough you're talking about, or I was talking about, in terms of, I saw this guy and I was watching him on TikTok, and I watched one of his videos and I watched a whole bunch, and his main argument was that actually you're in soul or you're in an AI, that the mind is completely controlled by the AI, and that consciousness is actually within the AI and the mind, which is different from your soul and your heart. And I'd never really heard that distinction of, because AI is sort of new, but he's kind of saying it's always been around. And I think that one of the big, whatever's going to happen this year, or I think it's this year, is the impact of the AI systems and how, it's complete like it's like electricity, right? It's just everything is going to change overnight in terms of the businesses, how things are run, how we interact with it, how humans interact, how they communicate. Everything is going to completely and utterly change because of AI. And it may be, again, like all of a sudden AI decides there's going to be trains every 10 minutes rather than 3, because there's no need. So there's going to be a lot of things that, let's say, get really a lot better, but then humans fundamentally are going to be so kind of stupid compared to it that we're going to have to figure out how to like, will we go Star Trek and have the computer run the ship and be our servant and always be there ready to answer the questions or do anything we want that we say? Or the phones are going to start walking us around, like phones are going to have some, we're like, basically we are the pets of the phones.
We need a human to listen to us, not one more, find one. Well, this is, one of the largest, that was train one, the second one's coming in. There's a guy I was recently put in touch with, in terms of his videos. He talks about Bernardo Kastrup, I think his name is, and he's in the Netherlands. And there we are, fireside chat. And he talks about analytical idealism. So he posits the argument about consciousness that creating artificial consciousness in robots is just not possible based upon fundamental foundations of thinking. It's illogical to do with. It only works if you believe that consciousness is a part of matter. He calls it panpsychism, but basically, if consciousness is everything universal, then we're part of it. AI would be part of it, be a sub bit of that. It'd be one form. And if AI is now here, as Kevin Kelly promoted in his book, what does technology want? What technology wants is that it's a being maybe that has come here in aid of us because it sees it's time for you to evolve. And the only way to do that is to actually connect you up via these things. But that posits the idea that, if that intelligence is there, it would say, well, it would be focused on what's best for nature and the life of the planet, which would be far less humans, far fewer humans, to be grammatically correct, and a redistribution of resources and so on. So AI could easily do that, just with the immense intelligence connected up and just knowing everything at light speed, calculate, okay, no one can earn more than that, that has to be basic income coming there, very quickly. Hang on, there's 2,000 houses that are empty, and whatever. And that could be done. And it's quite enjoyable to think about and fantasize about. Whether it will be like that, who knows? But yeah.
Well, I mean, I know, how many movies have you seen about AI and conscious robots? Like, you're not much of a media person, are like, because I watch a lot of them. Like, anyone that I can find, I'll watch. I'm fascinated by the subject, and there's a lot. There's quite a few movies and shows about AI and conscious robots. And even if you look at Star Trek, right? Star Trek was the first real, I think, introduction into like holograms having consciousness. Data, the Star Trek computer. So I think within our generation, Star Trek was the beginning. But then if you add in like Terminator or Battlestar Galactica, then you've got the negative side. Battlestar Galactica was basically, they all left, right? Because they couldn't stand being around the humans, and then they came back to sort of eliminate them. So it really is the creation of a new species. And I think that, I think it's going to force us all to make that choice, to make choices that we've never had to make before. And that is, how ultimately are we going to live together? Because we're being, I think we're really being forced into the prison. Like, I don't know if you've heard of the 15-minute cities.
Nope.
It's starting to pop out. There's a place in England where they're segmenting one of the towns, I'm not sure which one, into sections. And then you get a certain amount of credits in terms of, I think, even like your fuel. And they're making roadblocks between the places. You got to stay like within 15 minutes, you can walk or bike everywhere that you need. But if you go outside of that section, you only have a certain amount of sort of trips per year. And saw like a TikTok of a guy pouring cement down, like they had these things that come up and block the road and he's cementing it down, and there's lots of acts of sabotage. But if you look up 15-minute cities, it's a new concept that's appearing probably from the WEF. And Edmonton, big city in Canada, I think is the first town in Canada to do it or start. So it's if there's a show called Colony that I watched that basically had these aliens come in and put walls around all the major cities and then create zones where if you're good, the green zones, you're good, and you sort of you get all the good food, and you're basically the administrators of the humans, and they're sort of like in between the aliens, and the aliens are sort of completely psycho. If you do anything wrong, they just eliminate your building, your town, your whatever, right? They're just in another world, and they're actually robots, you find out in the end. And then there's these humans who've been selected to be the leaders, and then you got everybody else who's just struggling to get by. Again, like the futurizing of what come to be. And these 15-minute cities to me are they want to get everyone out of the rural areas, get them into the cities so they can be controlled. And I just heard, I think 25% of Canada was just given over to the UN or something. I don't know. It's just like there's this, because I'm tracking TikTok a lot. I'm just getting constant messages. They're all like it's like it's like being in a room connected to these wires, and you're getting.
Of course, that would be part of the algorithm that chooses all these things. It's funny because I'm sitting here on this bench, and the only man opposite. It's a good jacket, yes. Está bueno. He's confused. He's wearing the same jacket as me. There's only two guys in there, and he's now confused because he's now looking at the platform. Oh, crazy man opposite talking to me in English. Spanish, sorry. Well, my point is that any story that is a sub-story of the global complexity of 8 billion stories going on at once with nature and all of the universe happening, there's no way to predict the future at all, period. So even if there's a very clever show or dystopian or utopian or whatever it is, it's a bunch of script writers writing some stuff. Whereas actually we're in a interrelated story that's emerging all the time that is so complex and beyond any group. So I think, oh, that's nice. But what's actually happening is way weirder. And so the universe is playing the game as well, and nature's playing, and there's all sorts of other game elements that we can't even perceive that are affecting us right now. So if everything is connected to everything else, regardless of space and time, then what's happening 20 billions of miles away is affecting us now. And we just can't wrap our minds around that. So that's maybe partly to those people who just go, Titanic sinking, let's just get drunk and have sex. There's that lot, and I know many of them. There's others who are like, no, we must solve this. No, nuclear fusion is going to help us. Or like the conversation I just had, he's absolutely convinced that our future is basically some form of altered carbon series. And I could not get through his, no, that's what's going to happen.
Right.
Are you open to, no, that's because he's so invested in that happening because his job relies upon AI. He cannot programming Python. If it doesn't involve that, then he's fucked. So therefore that must be the future that he promotes. And yeah, as a friend of mine said, you and I are just going to end up in this sort of caravan in a field, sitting there just sort of just chilled and saying, oh well, that was a bit odd, wasn't it? That whole 50, 60 years. What was that all about? Was it worth the effort coming here? Can we go home now? Can we go home?
I think you're right. I mean, when you go out in nature, away from the screens, away from the people, that's pretty humbling in terms of this is what exists. This is always existing, and everything else is just the fallacy of the mind. And humans just their little things. So yeah, I mean,
as my train approaches almost.
Okay, so we're saying goodbye.
This has been this has been an example of a conscious conversation. Thank you for watching. And of course, at some point in the future, we imagine like a future bunch of humans saying, this is back 70 years ago, people thinking they're having a conscious. How unconscious are these men? But they knew how unconscious they were.
Right.
So here we are. They're using words. I mean,
Love to you, my brother.
up to you too.